it's very easy in leadership to get lonely. And part of the reason it's easy in leadership to get lonely is because leaders are focused often, and they're dealing with problems most of the time.
Right.
And so it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of wins. And the community reminds us that my failures are not total failures because they're a win for everybody. So some people will have successes and some people will have failures, and those will flip-flop all the time. And the community idea lets us know that we're winning together and that my failures have a purpose, they have a place, they have a reason within just the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish, so that we don't define what I am doing or what God is doing by the singular moments of my own life. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the H3X Podcast with your hosts, Mark Gearing and Dave Miller. Casey's in Oklahoma City and New York City once again.
Becoming a tradition.
Mark and I, it is becoming a tradition. It's a nice stopping place in between dropping off kids and the next step of work. At 192nd and Penn, if everybody wanted to know, in Oklahoma City. Mark and I have been kicking around just some ideas this morning, and we were like, when do we hit record and when do we not hit record? But this is the one real practical idea that both of us want to pause on this morning. And we want to talk about the incredible impact of the concept of an iron on iron on the work in a particular area and among leaders. I think, Mark, the iron on iron is probably one piece in movement practice or among groups who are trying to facilitate the entrustment and the growth of leaders. It's the one practice that is somewhat not understood, but when someone goes through it, they'll go, that was really, really, really good, but they may not understand why it's important to keep them going over and over and over and over again. So I thought I would tee that up today, and let's talk about what is the practical significance in the life of a leader to participate in and be in an iron on iron. And so let's start with what is an iron on iron, and then we'll unpack why they're important.
That's great. I love the practicality of this one. So my short answer to that, Dave, would be, and I apologize, I'm still under the weather a little bit with my coughing, but that an iron on iron is it's a process for problem solving. And so this fits into our disciple making and into our multiplication, especially multiplication, because if we're going to go after making disciples, we could be effective in that with some simple tools. That's awesome. If we want to plant a church, we might even be able to get to that. But if we want to see it go beyond that, we're going to get in the work after a while and realize that we're coming up against some challenges. Sometimes people call it a stuckage. And so we need to tackle those. And it could be just us doing it, but we've found there's a really helpful way of getting outside perspective from others to tackle those barriers, those challenges. And so it's a problem-solving process that rests on especially us going back to in the way we think about what is our authority and what is the process through which we're going to tackle challenges. We want to point back as much as possible to word and spirit, to what do we see in the word of God as examples that might help to inform the challenges, the barriers we're hitting up against. And then the Spirit of God. What is the Holy Spirit saying through people and to us directly as we pause and we look at these challenges so that we can make needed adjustments to continue to steward what God has entrusted to us.
And I would put the context of those iron on irons as really doing three big ideas for developing and moving a network of leaders forward. There's community involved, there's collaboration involved, and there's commitment. Right.
Yep.
And so the way in which I would unpack those three is that when the idea that you just shared about the actual what are we doing during an iron on iron time,
right,
it allows us as a community to get together, and it reminds us of two big things. One, I'm not alone, and two, I'm a part of something bigger than myself.
That's good.
It's very easy in leadership to get lonely. And part of the reason it's easy in leadership to get lonely is because leaders are focused often, and they're dealing with problems most of the time.
Right.
And so it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of wins. And the community reminds us that my failures are not total failures, because they're a win for everybody. So some people will have successes and some people will have failures, and those will flip-flop all the time. And the community idea lets us know that we're winning together, and that my failures have a purpose, they have a place, they have a reason within just the bigger picture of what we're trying to accomplish, so that we don't define what I am doing or what God is doing by the singular moments of my own life.
Yeah,
The second thing I would say is that it allows collaboration.
it does.
So if we collaborate with one another, then the wins have a place of benefiting everybody, and the failures have a way of benefiting everybody.
Yeah.
And so either that happens month to month, or quarter to quarter, or year to year, no matter which direction we feel like we might be in leadership, they have a way of contributing to the larger network, and it becomes a benefit to everyone. So we mourn together, we rejoice together, we lose together, we win together. And that elevates everybody, because we're all learning the lessons together if we're willing to get together on a regular basis and share those. And then the third one is a commitment, because if the community is collaborating together, then we're putting our wins and our losses in context of the community and of the work together. Then that's just going to increase my commitment, because I realize that what I'm doing has purpose, and it has a point, and it is helping us get further down the line. And so those things together remind me that we are winning, regardless of what each individual moment or each individual month seems to feel like at the time. And all of those based upon the word of God, and all of those holding us to these values that we want to move towards together, really combine to making iron on iron probably one of the most practical and one of the most important activities that we can regularly do. My question to you, Mark, is iron on iron seem to be really hard to get people to consistently do. What do you think the barriers are that we run into in terms of trying to get iron on irons together in networks and with leaders?
Yeah, that's good, Dave. I think there's a couple things that come to my mind in that kind of question. I think we've been looking at some different topics at different facets over the last number of months together. But one of those being that if we're going to have this idea of the muddy boots, where we're not just having a big vision, but we've got some real measurable steps along the way, it forces us to get focused on what milestones are going to be meaningful to make progress. And so I think maybe one of the first things I would say is oftentimes leaders either are so big vision minded that they don't take the time to think through what are those pieces, or they're so stuck in the mud that they don't see the value in having a big vision and identifying some meaningful steps of progress. They're just going through the motions of doing the stuff. And so some of that, I think, comes down to our perspective on our vision, maybe, of what is the end vision we're going to, and do we have clarity of what we're doing right now that will lead to meaningful progress. So that's a mindset piece that then I think the IOI comes to serve and to help. When we have that mindset, the iron on iron helps us to get to the next milestone. But that kind of forces us to, first of all, have the mentality there are milestones and there is a journey that we're on. So that would be a first thought for you.
And I would also say, I think self-leadership is probably one of the most misunderstood and misused ideas when it comes to leadership, because to get somebody who's emerging as a leader to really start to have influence and impact that's going to contribute on a larger scale,
Right.
they've got to get to the place to where their reliance on other people is not for direction and purpose and activity, that their reliance on other people is in terms of as a contributor, what I'm doing for the larger picture.
That's it. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, if someone has a hard time self-motivating, they're going to need a culture or an environment where they are pushed and challenged to critically think, to self-evaluate, and to strategize and make plans and decisions based upon the
Yeah.
barriers that they're impacting. And someone can't do that in a vacuum. They're never going to move into self-leadership without community, which is the irony of self-leadership, is that self-leadership requires community. And I think
Yep.
the misunderstanding of self-leadership is somehow what we mean is that you just become a really good leader that doesn't really need anybody else and you just go get it done. But that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about self-leadership is that you become a person who knows your place, your purpose, and you take responsibility and ownership to move your piece of the pie forward.
That's right.
And you aren't reliant upon someone else to do what you're responsible for, but you are reliant on everyone else to work as a team to make sure that you are getting better and that they're getting better at what we're doing. And the best place for us to teach people how to do this self-evaluation, this self-planning, this self-strategizing is inside these iron on iron environments where we sit down with them and they say, what are your barriers? What are your problems? What are your successes? What are your failures? What's your plan? And making them think through those ideas. And that takes time. And the best place to learn it is by doing. And the best place to do it is in an environment with other people who are also growing in this area. Yeah, you can't overemphasize enough the value of this environment.
Yeah, you can't. And there's other dynamics there too that I think we've got one this next week here with a team we've got locally. And what I'm excited to come out of that is that there are some common stuckages that I see. I don't know if everybody else sees that there's these common stuckages that are going to come out in that time, but they're going to come out and it's going to do several things. I think it's going to empower leaders to they're going to feel like they're not alone. So there's that piece for sure. They're not alone in tackling this, but it's going to force them to begin to think critically about those stuckages in principle, maybe even outside of their own context or the own like challenges of how that stuckage is playing out, which will help them to be more strategic problem solvers over time. And to do that within the context of this is who we are, this is what we are doing, and not just this is what I'm doing. And so I think all of those things happen all at once. And I don't know if I could even put my finger on any one part of it, but I think all those things kind of just come out at once, that there's this community that begins to be formed through it of this is who we are. As a tribe begins to form through it. This is who we are. This is what we do. And there begin to become some network owned solutions to those problems of saying, this is what we then have to contribute potentially to the larger body of Christ, because this is how we are beginning to tackle these challenges. And so it not only helps, the format not only helps to tackle the challenge, but create a sense of ownership and contribution beyond us.
So let me take the idea that I think you articulated, and I want to dive real deep into one particular point of that. And that is, when you teach someone to think critically, you're teaching them to ask questions. You're teaching them to not just assume everything as you've always assumed it. You're teaching them to pull in outside opinions, outside ideas, and to begin to bring those to bear on barriers and issues and problems. Okay, when you do that, it causes unstable footing. You start to go, okay, I'm not confident in something, and I'm looking for ways to get confident. And so you bring up all the critiques, you bring up all the questions, you bring up all the challenges. The piece about what you just said that I think is super important is, if we teach people to just simply think critically, then we leave them with the inability to make decisions, because decisions are always going to be based upon values. I have to value something in order to make a decision after critically challenging an idea. Because if I'm just left with options and I don't have a way to narrow down how to decide between those options, then I'm paralyzed. And what an iron on iron does in the context of what you just said is, we have a value system that we as a group are moving forward with together. And that value system allows us to then take all of the options, the challenges, the ideas, the critiques, and channel them through this filter. which is here's who we are, here's what we're wanting to accomplish, and here's what we do to accomplish. Here's the things that are the do's, here's the things that are the don'ts, and it allows me to then make a decision. And in emerging
Yeah.
leaders, the hardest thing for someone to do to really be a critical contributor to the larger picture is giving them the confidence to make decisions that are based upon conviction, that are
Yeah.
based upon character, and that are based upon those values, and allows them to move forward with confidence that what they're going to do next is going to be a good and a right decision. If we can create that environment
Yeah.
where we can teach them to think critically, but we can also teach them how to navigate with values, then we empower them to make decisions. And that changes everything in the life of a young and emerging leader, is that decision-making confidence and ability. And I think if we do it as saying, we're going to do this together, then it reduces the other thing that hinders decisions. And that is, I don't want to bear the weight of a wrong decision or a consequence of a right decision even on my own. And the community can say, no, we're bearing this together. And so it mitigates how much weight an individual has to carry. And it allows them to even move forward more confidence that if something does go wrong, they've got someone behind them to help out again.
Yeah, that's good.
It's amazing how all of this happens in something as practical as a group of people getting together and asking each other questions about how's the ministry? How's the work? What are you struggling with? How can we help you? What decisions do you need to make?
Yep, that's right. And I think so. To bring in one other piece as we finish out this, but we've tossed around over the last year or so this idea of the 4 disciplines of execution, or 4DX, a book by Stephen Covey. And I think what's so critical, so helpful about that framework and concept is you start with a wildly important goal. You've got to act on some controllables, keep a compelling scorecard, and then have a cadence of accountability. Well, there's some different pieces in there from an IOI, but you do see just some really key pieces there for helping to move a group forward. And I think that's the big piece that I'm taking away from what you're saying and what you're bringing in today, Dave, is I think sometimes we can think of the I in iron on iron, me,
Sure.
Of how is this going to help me to move forward? But being able to, I think that kind of emerges when you do an iron on iron, and especially in the context of sometimes Dave will do we call it a problem solving retreat, where there's actually a full on retreat, and we might have some word time and some other pieces that are looking at some barriers that are common to everybody, and it brings it out. And we might look at some tracking together to say, how are we acting on those controllables to get to this piece? But there's a level of buy-in that comes out of that, along with that cadence of accountability. Somebody is going to follow up with me and help me to continue to grow, help us to continue to grow. That's super critical.
And the beauty is, we're in our radical middle again. We're always landing in the radical middle part. But the beauty is that when I get better, if I am a part of we, then we get better. And so the network actually gets better by investing together into each individual, so that each individual becomes a better participant and a better contributor to what we're doing.
That's right.
And so this constant tension between the two is huge. The big barrier, I think, to getting people involved with iron on irons, from my personal experience, going back to that question that I asked you, is as well, because we're unpacking some of those ideas. One more that I would throw in on that one question of what is the barriers to getting people to that is, I feel like the commitment to the larger, bigger vision gets overshadowed a lot by what I want and what am I going to miss out on, or am I committed to this thing? That's just a hard barrier to break. And I'm not sure I have the answers for that. But what I am saying is I would just say, if anyone's listening to this and they go, hey, what's the value of an iron on iron? I would say, if you've never been to one, either start one or find one to go to. And if you have been a part of one, every person that I've ever been talked to right after one will go, man, I'm really glad I did that, because they see the value of it almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
So I think what might even be helpful for us is that little graphic that came out of the work in Southeast Asia, the real simple circle. We'll share that in the show notes and put a link to it for you guys to see. but just to show you a very simple process, because this may sound complex, but it's actually a very simple, to the point, almost unassuming process that we're unpacking the value of doing this together as network leaders.
Yeah, that's good, Dave. Well, thanks for bringing this topic to us. I think this is super helpful for like introducing the practical side of this, but also some of the values that are added and infused into the network when we do something like this. It's good.
Hopefully we'll kick off some more iron on irons. Our encouragement to you guys is, if you haven't been doing them, start. And if you don't have one that you can go to, maybe take the graphic that we give you and just grab a handful of people and just get started working together and see what God's up to and what he does.
That's it. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for listening, for watching. If this content has been helpful for you, please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. It really helps us to get this content out there farther, to serve Jesus, grow his kingdom, and accomplish the Great Commission until there is no place left. Much love to you guys. See you next time.